Hedera is the most used, sustainable, public distributed ledger in the world, with use cases from preserving testimony to anchoring warning systems, ensuring the safe storage of vaccines, and allowing us to get back to life as we knew it, offsetting our carbon footprint while enjoying the new token economy. These are just a few of the game-changing applications built on Hedera, which is governed by the world's leading organizations and fueled by HBAR, the world's greenest cryptocurrency. What future will you build?
Thank you everyone for still being here. I'm Brady. We are the founders and founders of Web3 and AI panel. Before we begin the panel, can we do a quick round of introductions from the panelists? Brady, can we go with you, please?
Sure. Yeah. Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Brady Gentile. Previously, the last 5.5 years or so, I was working at Swirls Labs at Hedera as a director of product marketing. I departed from Hedera about 5 or 6 months ago and founded a lending Damordar protocol based on Aave V2 that's been deployed to the Hedera network. So we're in the process of building that out right now. We're live on testnet and hoping to support the Hedera DeFi ecosystem.
Awesome. Hey, Rosen here. I run the Center for Blockchain Accelerator, teach course on blockchain entrepreneurship in the engineering school there, and the Best Conference Series, and a managing partner of the Blockchain Builders Fund.
I'm Sharon. Thank you for having me. I am officially an investor at the early stage in the pre-seed startup community, generally in the AI and decentralized protocol space. I'm also a LP in a boutique venture fund out of San Francisco called Leonis Capitals. So we essentially invested in a early stage and pre-seed AI fully kind of AI first companies. A professional capacity, I actually work for a company called BMO Financial Group, it's the national bank in New York. We operate under the brand name of BMO Harris Bank. So in that capacity, I had an investment R&D function, essentially work with ecosystem partners to look for new tech companies, either for adoption or investing. Thank you for having me.
Good. Okay, no problem.
Yeah, my name is Will. I launched a pre-seed crypto VC fund this year called Third Earth Capital. Prior to that, I was a fund called Deris Capital. I did a high-frequency trade with crypto VC. I was the first investor in Movement Labs, Nirvana Labs, and Lever Lab Dead with that fund. Prior to that, I was at Apple Labs in 2018, where I helped grow their ecosystem. I was primarily focused on gaming. So if you think Avalanche is a gaming chain, I was one of the main guys associated with that. Prior to that, I did M&A investment bank at a couple of different banks. And I've done one AI deal, like decentralized compute deal out of this fund. It was Hypervolt Labs, Jasper Deal.
Awesome. Just a quick background on myself as well. I work as an investment associate at Delta Boston Fund. We're an early stage crypto native fund investing from pre-seed to Series A startups. A couple of our investments include Exons, StageTech, Wormhole, etc. Before this, I worked in equity research and in analytics at a tech startup, and also at a neobank building launching that. Cool. So let's kick off the panel. Maybe let's start with you. I'm going to throw a big heavy question at you first. So we know Web3 and AI are evolving technologies, and of late there has been a lot of convergence between the two of them. We'd love to understand from your perspective and given your background, how do you see these technologies evolving together and what sort of potential use cases that you're seeing in the market?
Yeah, definitely. So, the way that I'm thinking about AI and Web3 is, at least at this point, it seems that verification and validation of the data that is being utilized by models in AI. There's a play here where blockchain technologies can ensure the authenticity of that data that's being used. We're starting to see that one of the applications that's on Hedera that's been deployed recently is around climate data that's used in various AI models. And that AI model is available on Hugging Face and the data that's ingested and utilized by that model is being verified and made auditable on the Idera network. So uniquely, the Idera network essentially offers the ability to receive high throughput data streams, timestamp that data, and hash the data and make it sort of verifiable for anyone to look at. And so, with the emergence of these two things, I definitely see sort of verification of information being super important. Additionally, with generative AI and the outputs from generative AI, we're on the precipice of a lot of content and imagery and other outputs that are potentially misleading or for misinformation. And being able to identify and validate when information is true or when it's sort of generated by these models and fake is really important. You can use blockchain technologies and Web3 for that type of use case.
Awesome. Sharon, thank you with you because given your experience with large-scale data in the past, Brady also the kind of verification of the data. Like, what do you think are so there are two different ways to do this, right? Using AI for crypto or crypto for AI. And how do you think that's happening in the data?
It is also, I think, use cases myself. So I really don't want to break into what is the general theme. You really have to look at what is specific.
You're going to dive deeper into any of the other use cases that you're looking at from this perspective?
Not a lot. Now, in the space that in the institutional side, in the banking. So a lot of folks are trying to break into it and using maybe different broken data. But in reality, we can't do a whole lot yet, just because one of the things that we often talk about is environment driven. We don't. So in many of the use cases we're looking into, but we haven't been able to actually execute. So for that reason, I think for the folks that a lot of startup founders here, like you trying to get into banking space, and we've done many of the demos, but you're thinking that they're not getting back to you, they're ghosting you. It's not quite true because they simply do not have the ability to actually make the promises.
We got to understand from your perspective as well. Here, like Stanford is a hub for innovation. What do you think sort of use cases that students of the different accelerators or university and everything?
I mean, there's a lot of use cases, both at Stanford and outside of Stanford. I guess just to touch quickly on the more enterprise side of things, they're inventing. So Casper Labs has actually been doing quite a bit in terms of providing leveraging blockchain for governance of AI. They're teaming up with IBM, I believe, and to me, an ideal world would be where it is regulated that you need to leverage blockchain in some way or form to have proof of model, proof of data. We have Sarbanes-Oxley legislation, Basel II legislation, right? So, and for us to be able to understand how AI models are being used at enterprise, I think blockchain offers a really significant opportunity there. In terms of kind of where we're seeing innovation at Stanford, the reality is that the AI world doesn't care about blockchain. Most AI conferences think blockchain is a scam, and a lot of it is. I've been in this space for a while, right? But blockchain does care a lot about AI, and we have a ton of folks within the blockchain space whose backgrounds are AI, and they are building, and they're building across a range of different dimensions here, right? So you've got blockchain for AI, kind of to what you were speaking about. AI breaks the world. Pretty soon we're going to have 89% of content that's going to be generated online is going to be AI generated. It'll be AI agents that are interacting with other agents. How do you know what's true and what's not? So there's like an entire ecosystem of truth here. And there are like a number of companies that are working on like attestation for what is true, what isn't true. How do you know what that is? Then there's like proof of model. How do you know that the model that you're running is the model that you think it's running? So Modulus Labs is one of the teams that came out of our accelerator, and they're basically doing proof of model, right? Can you verify that this AI model is what it says it is, that it was trained on the data that it was supposed to, that it doesn't have bias? In New York, there's a law that if any HR company is going to be doing hiring based on AI, they have to prove what models they used and what other parameters that they take into consideration, that they don't have bias, right? WorldCoin is using Modulus Labs to determine, for instance, or to verify that the facial recognition model that's scanning your face is not just scanning your biometrics; it's actually like authentic. So there's like veracity and verification of data, of model, etc. Then there's this concept of agentic ecosystems in Web2 AI as well as Web3 AI is burgeoning, which is like you have all of these autonomous AI agents that need to interact with each other. They need to also, so we've got 3 or 4 teams that are working on different aspects of that. There's Xtrace, there's Heletic, of how do they interact with each other? Where are these AI agents running? How do they exchange actual transact with one another? How do they prove that they are who they say they are and they've done the work that they're supposed to do? And on top of that, like AI can only run on things that have been digitized. As more of the world needs to be is going to be more decisions that can be made by AI models. We need to digitize the world. How do you digitize the world? That's kind of what you were speaking. That's like blockchain is this public digital infrastructure that lets that. And lastly, there's marketplaces, right? So there's centralized AI and decentralized AI, the whole open source AI ecosystem. How do you fund that? How do you ensure that as people contribute data, whether it's training data, whether it's like retrieval augmented generated, like RAG data, data becomes much more valuable here, especially because it used to be in the days of big data, you needed like tons and tons of data sets to be able to make any decisions. Now you can have much smaller data sets are much more valuable because you can use them as like context data for generative models. So like marketplaces for data, marketplaces for open source AI, incentive structures there. So it's literally touching the whole gamut. Sorry, I went off for a while.
No, absolutely. I think that's the one thing. I think that the space is so new that there's so many use cases that are being figured out. I would love to get you over here, Bill, as well, because as a pre-seed investor, right, it's very difficult to segregate what's noise and what's just demand. What sort of indicators or what sort of parameters do you look at when you see it, like when you see someone building in the space to figure out what's noise in this?
Yeah, there's a lot of noise. So like I said, I've done one deal in like sort of the decentralized compute AI space. Like right now, as someone who's trying to learn very quickly, but it's really hard to be an expert in AI and everything else in crypto. There's like a few areas like broadly that I see. There's like training, which are these like marketplaces for compute that are popping up everywhere. There's AI like fine tuning, which I've seen only a couple of decks attacking the space. And then there's also inference, which is what we think of as, talking to ChatGPT. And then there's also the space of point operated agents, which some people have been talking about. I haven't seen too many people building around that. Everyone right now seems to be focused on what seems to be the lowest hanging fruit, which is trainings. How do we sell all these GPUs? And there's a bunch of tokens around that. But in terms of like looking at decks and evaluating opportunities, obviously you have to make sure that these folks like know what they're building. So, I've taken bets on like really young folks, and to an extent there are things you can like learn on the job, but you need to make sure the team is technical enough to like get to an MVP, or like they know they can build enough and they have folks they can hire to get there. I've also seen like folks who say, we want to build this thing around decentralized AI. Like, well, how do you fit a blockchain into this? Because like I'm a crypto focused firm, not just like an AI focused like investment fund. And if they can't, a lot of these folks I think end up trying to fit like a square peg into a round hole. And it goes back to I think an earlier point that was made, which is like not a lot of AI really needs a blockchain. It's certainly not sensible to say we're going to put this entire model on chain. You have to figure out sort of the right blend of things on chain versus pointing to databases off chain. So certainly can have proofs on chain. A lot of people, you do on chain proofs and sort of off chain compute. That makes perfect sense. But I haven't heard too many people building things that I think make a lot of sense because it's also very difficult. There needs to be a defensible sort of moat, or at least a closed source moat, so you have an initial go to market. And these people need to generally be like experts in distributed systems. So a lot of noise, but some people are building really cool stuff like hyperbolic labs. You can look it up.
So very well said. And appreciate your investment there. Well done. But I would like to double click on what you mentioned around decentralized versus centralized AI. I'm not thinking this from an investor perspective in terms of financial returns, but like more so from the social impact intelligence is where like how you guys see that as well. Because I think like AI primarily has been built by centralized big tech companies, but I think that is where crypto can come in and sort of make it decentralized. So we'll look at a certain perspective on like from social lens as well, not just financial returns. Whoever was
I can start. I think there's a parallel between AI and blockchain tech where open source is really driving the way. And so, although open source isn't by nature always decentralized, it does create a lot of transparency for AI around the models that are employed, their weights, the data that's used as part of it. So I think, as AI evolves, especially like the outsized impact that it's going to make, it's accelerating so quickly. Having that kind of transparency, especially from like a safety perspective, is really important. And then I think Billy mentioned sort of governance and AI, and I do think there's probably a play there where you could employ sort of DAO governance structures that help to sort of steer the direction of these AI models, the rules and limitations that they have. So it's very, very early, but I do think there's sort of a play between those two.
I mean, right now, most like large AI companies actually forget AI for a second, just digital platforms, period, are owned and run by 3 or 4 large tech companies, right? So these are walled gardens. So the internet basically is no longer as decentralized as we think it is. Most of what we're doing is within these walled gardens of Meta, Google, Microsoft, Tencent, ByteDance, etc. If you think of it, what that actually means is that you don't own you have no agency, and you don't own any of your own data, your own identity, or anything like that. Most of what you're doing online right now is in someone else's environment that has their own interests in mind. Now they're building these incredibly capable AI models, whether it's again Anthropic, OpenAI, Claude, etc. That we have no idea what they're doing, how that they're going to be able to use our information, us, and what the ramifications of that is, especially as more of our lives become digitized. So to me, that's a risk, especially. I don't know how much you guys follow the accelerationist versus decelerationist kind of debate, and whether we're going to get to a world of AGI. So now, when you live in this place of walled gardens, that means like if you're outside the garden, theoretically you can't get in. But once you're inside the garden, inside the VPN, inside the quote unquote worlds of Google or Meta or OpenAI, whatever is executing there could, in theory, have access to all of its information and do whatever it wants. That has some like pretty catastrophic potential risks associated with it. The idea behind like decentralized AI, decentralized blockchain-based AI is that instead of kind of all information sitting in this walled garden, information itself is basically either encrypted or owned or managed or controlled by the individuals themselves. And instead of a walled garden, everyone kind of has their own little mini garden that can protect them. Now, in a world where AI becomes incredible, super intelligence, the AI, AGI kind of risk here, if it can run rampant through all of these like large platforms, we have no control over how it affects us. In a world where each of us controls our own identity, controls our own data, and decide to what degree we interact with AI models and AI agents, how they interact with each other, the AI agents themselves will operate on a much more restricted kind of infrastructure, so to speak. And basically what we're talking about is building public digital infrastructure for us and for AI agents to interact with.
Add to that, I remember the conversation last week we were having internally. There was a hypothesis we were trying to validate. That is, if we're dealing with, we will probably not need a whole lot other than just working with the big tech, the AWS or the Microsoft and so on, because one way or other, they already been building outside of the normal type of offering, venturing into the AI, venturing into the digital humans, so on and so forth. So for enterprise, do we really need to look for any SaaS applications outside of it? So that's concept of what is the trade-off there? So one of the things that we all look at is the open sourcing. And so many of those are very efficient, but when we say that we want to kind of put any kind of startup solutions, generally either going to save money or making the process much more efficient, comes down to whether one is going to provide another value. But open source AI also comes with the transparency of where data is and whether or not you have the ability to be able to go back to it and be able to actually use what it generally is. So for financial institutions or highly regulated companies, the ability to provide proof for your model and proof for everything else that associated with it, that comes with the other aspect, I think that's probably will connect back to what you had talked about earlier is the fairness and bias. It's not black and white. So for many of the things that we say, is there an absolute fairness in data or is there absolute clean data? The answer is probably not. So I was having a debate with a colleague of mine just last week. So one of the data points that was kind of people were talking about is Uber pays the female drivers a lot less than the male drivers. Statement itself is factually accurate to the dot. But what people didn't know is the female drivers tend to have a tendency to not doing the peak hours, not doing the late hours, and do not go into the locations a bit further from their home residence and prefer to stay safe zones. As a result, the pay overall compensation is a lot lower. Again, these are underlying data. What if you want to think about one step further? Now, these data of the female driver and male driver, they're going to feed into the overall stats at the end of the day when it comes to the CRS and everybody's compensation. So if you are using any kind of public data later on to analyze the gender diversity of what the pay gap might be between the genders, you've got the bias inherently residing with data. Now, to what degree you will be able to eliminate these biases within these data sets that's been inherently. So I think that there's many things that we really have to take into consideration.
Absolutely. I think we've touched on a lot of use cases around, for example, dark governance, on-chain agents, etc. One question that I wondered is, so for example, like in 2000s, like who would have thought that I would be talking to 20 years down the line, I would be talking to my parents in India on the phone, on a video call, free of course, right? So I think, how do you guys see the use cases that we're talking about? A lot of folks are building right now, but there is no mass adoption. What do you think are the infrastructure requirements that need to be made for us to actually get there, and how far out are we? Is it in 10 years? Is it 15 years? And what sort of things have to be made to do that? For example, from a crypto perspective, the UX sucks, right? Like who wants to remember the seed phase? Who wants to remember their account or whatever? So what do you guys think are the infra requirements together?
Yeah, I think so. Like to draw an analogy, like I think we have there will always be more chains, but for all intents and purposes, like the existing L1s and L2s like work for like normal dApps, DeFi. You can kind of build whatever you want already. But AI is actually just like very difficult because you have to get so many people to coordinate. And so like a lot of these marketplaces, they have these different ways of verifying you did your compute properly. So like the chains, more or less work. The chains will always be optimized. There will always be new L1s, whatever. But in terms of infra for AI, I'm not an expert, but I do know there's like 3 or 4 different approaches being taken, at least in terms of like how we verify computes, like optimistic proofs, like ZK proofs, hyperbolic labs doing proof of relay, and some teams just doing no proofs at all. You're just trying to hope that the game theory works out, the incentives sort of going in the right direction. But I will tack on just one quick idea. I think like something that could be interesting just in terms of like bringing like normal AI to crypto or a use case of blockchains for crypto and some of the info that could be needed there is this idea of like initial model offerings. So like was said earlier, you have effectively, 4 big tech companies, maybe 5 or 6, that are building all these models because there's so few people with resources to get access to the latest chips, data centers, every machine required to make that happen. And so a problem is access to compute. A lot of people building that, but then actually getting those people to coordinate together. Someone did send me, and I know a couple guys building around this idea of branch train mix. So having a bunch of different devices, low level devices, like extremely strong devices, building towards training the same model. So like I'm sure there's infra that still needs to be built around like training. But I think inference, I would assume, is more straightforward. Fine tuning, I'm not sure. But I do think it'd be cool if like you have like this infra where people can train a model, be compensated for that, like this model's token, and you're also helping out, these like Web2 companies which is trying to get their model out there. So I'm sure there's more to be built. I just only know like this amount around AI.
I'm going to add 2 points to that. I think there's environment aspects of it, which is really reg environment, and there's technicality aspects of it. So from the environment perspective, I think it's really going to be going back to when they reg are going to get there, it's in line, how they clear directions, so what is allowed and what's not allowed. So I think amongst large banks, we've started building the crypto kind of services a couple of years ago. At this point, we're going to continue to be stalled because really, it's not ready. Do we have the capabilities, infrastructure built? Most of us do. They can essentially be deployed as long as we know what is allowed, what is not. We are not at this point, is simply because we don't know what we will be able to do. So that's one. So that is really indefinite until that becomes kind of clear. Technicality side of it, think of those crypto and AI. There's one aspect of the technical development of model. I think it is plenty, and there's a lot of resources. There's many possibilities that's the sky's the limit in terms of the type of business they need to tackle. One aspect of it, though, is the privacy security aspects of these new technologies, which is a lot of people know, but not 100% clear. So, give you an example. I think over the past 6 months or so, my team has been working with all the enterprise architects and for this year, trying to understand exactly how we can build that generate that towards the infrastructure that we need to do, the type of things that we need to consider towards the suite of V5 packages. So it's the same kind of concept, like what exactly do we need to do, and as the technology continues to evolve, to what specifically we need to actually do. And some of these solutions start coming into the market, and they are just simply not adequate enough to deal with the type of what we need necessary from these different technologies. So I think until these pieces are in place, the institutional side of application really needs to be.
Right. So I guess to touch upon your question, there's 2 parts to this. Like, where's the crypto adoption period, and was there AI adoption or crypto AI adoption? I think kind of like Will as you were saying from a training perspective. So there's Jensen is doing like kind of AI model training. You've got Sapiens that's doing like data labeling. So I think the real market here is the Web2 market, right? Because it's people with real needs. Deepin is really interesting, and like decentralized physical infrastructure, and they're collecting data, they're doing things in the real world that actually have value to real people as opposed to just as crypto traders. And the ability to run kind of edge AI there. I guess in crypto in general, I think I consider crypto to really be about a year old. And what I mean by that is, yes, the concepts are from the Bitcoin white paper back in the early 2000s. But late 2000s. But realistically, as of a year ago, we've hit this mark where you can actually solve usability. We have a ton of traction. You can create programmable wallets. Most of these things are scalable to the point now where you have like near gasless and like super high throughput. I think that the 2 main things that probably in the infrastructure that are outstanding are ZK and FHE, where ZK was at 10,000x the cost of like verifiable compute. using zero knowledge proofs was about 10,000x the cost. One of our team's modular labs brought it down to 20x. That's continued to come down. I think as soon as we have like fully homomorphic encryption as well, we'll like get to a place where we can actually have like at near parity to have verifiable compute and privacy preserving encrypted compute, which to me like is a game changer for compute in general.
Yeah, I mean, speaking on this from like a Web3 crypto perspective, this space, as you said, it feels like it's about a year old, and like every couple years, you think that you're closer, but no, you're not. And yeah, being an emerging technology, that cycle starts out with these standards and technologies really looking like toys. And it's really easy to look at crypto, I think, and go, okay, it's monkey pictures and sushi tokens and all of these things that don't really look too mature. It also comes with, due to its financial nature, a lot of sort of scams and people taking advantage of the space. But I think it is part of the natural process of emerging technology, as any technology goes through. And it's got to undershoot user needs at first, and people are throwing so much against the wall as it evolves to see what sticks. And it's going to take time for all of the standards that arise to mature and to fulfill the needs of more enterprise-focused use cases. But the other side of it is when you look at past emerging technologies, typically it sort of runs up against incumbents and disrupts what incumbents are doing. And what I think I'm starting to see is sort of disruption of incumbents or enterprises, banks, other various institutions that are part of traditional finance, and finding paths and inroads to supplant them instead of augment their capabilities. So there obviously will be sort of augmentation, but I think at the end of the day, the incumbents are going to have to either adapt to this or end up dying off. And in the midst of that, you're going to see the emergence of some of these Web3 companies start eating the lunch of traditional finance. And yeah, timeline, I don't know. It's every year it feels like it's like longer.
So I think we're out of time, but then just to quickly wrap this up, because there are a lot of founders over here. Any parting thoughts on what sort of pitfalls that to fall into, or what sort of ideas that they should go out and build on? Any parting thoughts?
Yeah, I'll just say one thing. I think generally, like the types of businesses I'm investing in, like just think about like who your target market is, like very soberly. So like I'm not really investing in a lot of like super crypto native use cases for crypto native people. Generally, the folks I'm investing in are building like crypto native use cases, kind of like for everyone. So I think every once in a while, you got to take like a super sober look at like on-chain metrics, or like really thinking about who's actually going to use your product, who's actually going to pay for it, where like the money's going to come from, not just like token price.
The only thing that I would say is I think as AI becoming more of a general use technology, opportunities are endless. So, but there's also kind of be very mindful as you kind of looking and jumping into the type of solutions we're starting to look into investing. Is generally also looking at what is in addition to scalability, is are you actually fit into the new economic reality? That's what you're talking about. Do people actually have the money to spend on it, and what is that going to be for whether or not the market condition of the deployment of your solution? That tend to play into a lot when VCs make their investment decisions as well.
Yeah, something Will mentioned earlier about there being a lot of like tech companies that do the same thing. The problem is we've got a ton of companies that are basically taking in Web 2 and in Web 3, like wrap around ChatGPT and like launching a token, saying it does something but really doesn't, right? So it's for us. I think that there's two ways to look at this. Either you're going out to the go-to-market where you have experience in a specific sector, you know that sector inside out, you can somehow leverage technology in an interesting way. Ideally, you still have a technical mode, otherwise someone else will just copy you. But you really need a ton of like real-world experience. Or this is kind of where we like to focus more because we're a bunch of nerds over at Stanford. Is the technical side. Like if you're actually building real innovation, real cryptography, real multimodal innovations, real approaches to optimize. The number of compute marketplaces that exist. Like we invested in one because it was the only one that actually had at that time, other than Verbalic, we actually talked to them in 5 minutes. Was exhibits that was accelerating consumer GPUs to commercial GPUs. So it's if there's real tech and real innovation there, then VCs will look at you and will fund you and will support you because you're actually making a difference.
I agree with Will's point around fundamentals, at least from a Web3 perspective. I think if you're addressing user needs based on the market as it exists today, and people are willing to pay for that, and you're evolving with the market as it goes along, it's moving so quickly. So I think it's important that whatever it is that you're building, you're laying a foundation for whatever is going to be happening next. And then, ideally, to Bill's point, if you have innovations that are part of that are deep tech innovations that you think can act as a moat as you continue to evolve, that's really important. But looking at fundamentals critically, because there's so many projects that are a flash in the pan. Maybe they're exciting for one moment and the users spike and then they just die off, and that's just so common in space.
Awesome, guys. Thank you.